Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will be discussing the article The Virtue of Temperance by Sean Eyre.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we will be discussing the article The Virtue of Temperance, which was featured in the May 2020 issue of the Fraternal Review, which did a whole entire issue about temperance. And so we'll be discussing the article, which is the last in the series, is by Sean Eyre, who's a past master of a lodge in California. And I guess it was my turn to choose an article this week's and as part of our ongoing series. Oh, wait, I forgot to do introductions. Grr. All right, so I'm Matt Appel. I'm a Mason here in Washington in Mill Creek, number 243. And with me, I have our usual gang of knowledgeable individuals. We have Stephen Chung, who's up in Prince Charles Lodge in Kelowna, British Columbia. Jarrod Dunham of Penticton Lodge, also in British Columbia. And David Colbeth, who's a member of King Solomon Lodge down in Auburn, Washington. So, hi guys. And I guess my first question is, does anybody have any grand thoughts on the article about temperance? Did it ring any bells? Did it make you go, man, I wish I'd been a little more temperate?
It made me get out Pike's book, Jarrod. I actually dug into Morals and Dogma today, so there you go.
That's okay. Well, it made me break out my ritual.
Hey, there you go.
To see how much it differs from what you guys do.
So yeah, I guess I should begin by saying that. Well, was the temperance movement a thing in Canada? Was there a whole movement to outlaw alcohol in the?
Yes and no. It wasn't the same as in the state, because Canada's not the same as the States. Like, there were some provinces had had prohibition, some provinces didn't, which is why we tended to ship a lot of whiskey down south during prohibition, because it wasn't illegal to make it up here. But yeah, there have been temperance movements up here to varying degrees. Interesting.
Yeah, so I still remember during my Navy days that we could go over to when we visited the Canadian ships, we could have a beer on the ship. That was big doings, because the Navy our Navy ships were dry. But I feel like I should start this conversation by saying that the temperance we're talking of here is not the what was her name, Carrie Nation with the hatchet opening kegs of ale on the street kind of thing. This is the temperance of self-control and not making irrational choices and making not going overboard in any given direction. So I feel like, at least here in the States, you say temperance, and that's immediately what people's mind jumps to. But I made some notes here. The article starts talking about the Cardinal Virtues that Plato named: temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice. The four Cardinal Virtues. And sort of traced the history of them, which I found interesting, but I don't know is wildly exciting as a topic to discuss. Does anybody have any thoughts on the first couple of paragraphs there?
I didn't circle it in the beginning, but I circled later charity and justice, because they, again, going back to Pike, he talks about that the virtue has with him two principal forms: respect for others and love for others, namely justice and charity. And so I thought that was interesting, that even though they're separate, the theological virtues, according to Pike, were brought in later when the Christians were adopted, if you will, and that the cardinal virtues are essentially pagan in their origins, but Pike brought them together. Even though he identified them as separate, he brought them together in that charity and justice are inseparable.
So do you, down here in the States, we go through the four cardinal virtues during the lecture after the first degree. Do you guys do that up there too? Is that a thing?
In the ancient work, it's a much longer lecture than in the Canadian work.
I'm trying to learn it right now. The Junior Warden's lecture,
in the Canadian work, they have in Canadian craft lodges, they have appended to the four corners of their ceilings 4 tassels, which represent the 4 cardinal virtues, which we don't have in ancient lodges up here. But that's pretty much all the Canadian work talks about the cardinal virtues. It just mentions that the 4 tassels and that's it.
It's
Whereas
interesting.
we have pages of ritual that go like for doing the 4 cardinal virtues in the ancient work up here. Actually, and Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, because I was having an issue. Faith, hope, and charity. Up here, it's different.
What do you mean?
Ancient work. The tenets of Freemasonry are brotherly love, relief, and truth.
Yes, but faith, hope, and charity are the theological virtues.
Where are they mentioned?
We have no, they're actually in the
I think the first
Junior Warden's lecture.
Yeah, in the first degree lecture.
Yeah. I haven't got to that part of the lecture yet. I don't have to know it until May, right? But yeah.
It's not in your lecture at all? The theological virtues?
I was going over it today. They're not in there.
Those that are listening note that Jarrod's shaking his head vigorously.
All right. I'm supposed to go, I'm shaking my head in the no position. But regardless, it's just, but yeah, in the ancient work, we the 4 cardinal virtues get a lot of discussion.
Now I'm gonna have to go.
I think we do like a paragraph on each one as part of the first degree ritual.
It's like a page and a half, isn't it?
Yeah, thereabouts.
Yeah. Oh, I should mention that when I say a page, I mean our book isn't very big.
Yeah, so this is 8.5 by 11. So yeah, it's probably
probably the same. It's probably the same stuff.
Yeah, but we have the theological in there as well. That's interesting. When you mentioned about the 4 tassels, I was reading also in Pike. He talks about that, and I don't mean to jump ahead, Matt, but in the article that talks about the mosaic pavement, and that apparently that was an innovation in American lodges, and the idea of the indented tessel was also an innovation, and that in England, the only way it has any connection is that in England on the tracing board has a tessellated border because it has, just like Jarrod said, the 4 tassels in the corners. So it's interesting that you have the 4 tassels on the ceiling, and they have the 4 tassels on the tracing board, and we have the 4 on the tassels on the mosaic pavement.
There's actually a lodge not far from me here. There's one in Snohomish, Centennial number 25, and they actually have the 4 tassels in their lodge room. And I visited them a few times, and every time I go, what are those things doing there? Now I've learned. And I'm sorry, and they represent, as Jarrod said, they're in England on the trestle board. They represent the 4 cardinal virtues, and so I didn't know that either.
Yeah,
interesting. So do you have mosaic pavement in Canada?
Yes.
Yeah, we have the mosaic paint with a tessellated border.
Yeah.
But in ancient lodges, we don't have the 4 tassels. There's nothing in our ritual related to them. Which always, because we share lodges with Canadian lodges as well. And I used to always sit in my lodge going, why do we have these things?
So obviously the virtues are a pretty important deal then.
Me personally, or just to
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always feel bad during the first degree lecture because we meet in a banquet room essentially, and so he's pointing on the trestle board out the tessellated border and the blazing star and the et cetera, and none of that stuff's here. You just look at the little picture.
Yeah, we have difficulty with that too. We don't have those on the ground. We don't have a mosaic pavement ground or a tessellated border, so we have to use images of some kind.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's in the fellowcraft. It's in the senior warden's lecture, actually, not the junior warden's lecture. And actually, that is actually part of the entered apprentice lecture. Senior warden's lecture says here, covering the lodge is a clouded canopy or star-decked heaven where all good Freemasons hope to arrive. and last by the aid of the theological ladder, which Jacob in his vision saw ascending from to earth, the three principal rounds of which were denominated faith, hope, and charity, which admonishes us to have faith in God, hope in immortality, and charity to all mankind. Right?
But
that's
the greatest
where it
thing
is
is
in
charity. For charity extends beyond the grave to the
So
boundless
you're
realm.
saying that's in the fellowcraft degree? You're saying?
No,
or-
it's in the senior warden's lecture of the entered apprentice degree.
Oh, you have. Now wait a minute.
Yeah, so we have a junior warden's lecture which goes through the first part of the degree and its meaning, its purpose, and
yeah,
right, and goes through the steps of what
yeah.
what happened, and then it goes on to the education part from the
Interesting.
senior
We call
warden.
that the master's lecture. The master's is the first part. Is the the remembrance of what happened.
Yeah,
Nope.
it's one big lecture for us. Yeah, and
Yeah,
we actually,
Yeah.
our lodge once asked years and years ago. We asked the Grand Master if we could break up the lecture and say, three guys wanted to learn it, but rather than having one guy do the whole thing, and each do a third and then rotate or something. And we got told in no uncertain terms that we will only have one person deliver the entire lecture.
Really? That's how we do it. We divide it up.
Oh, really? Oh. I don't remember who the Grand Master was then. I was pretty young Mason, but yeah, we were.
Do you guys do the same thing, Jarrod? Do you have it split up?
What, the lectures in the entered apprentice degree?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Ours isn't split on purpose, though. We just do it arbitrarily, just so it's not just like senior warden, junior warden, whatever.
Oh yeah, ours are split on purpose.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, according to the article, the Cardinal Virtues were inserted into Masonry in the 1760s. So that's pretty early.
So like basically almost when Masonry started.
Well, it depends.
No, it does. Oh, are we going down that hole? Are we?
No, we're not. That's what I'm saying. Just you all can believe whatever you want.
It's not belief. There's truth. No.
The truth is out there. So yeah. So the second, for me at least, the part of this article that spoke to me more was sort of started on page 2 there on the sort of the right hand column there. Did you guys? I guess I don't want to skip ahead if someone had something they wanted to say before that, but
No, let's get into the meat of it.
there you go. So yeah,
I'm feeling ornery.
uh-oh. So yeah, he asserts that the understanding of temperance was rather more sophisticated than we regard it today, and it was the identifying. I should just read out the article instead of my notes. One of the identifying marks of a human responsibility and potential to embody a higher standard of behavior. Which, I mean, I don't know. I feel like we almost toss it around. Yeah, temperance, whatever. It's in a lecture. But he seems to take it really seriously.
Well, I mean, it is supposed to, teach us to, keep ourselves restrained from, from excessiveness, right? Like we're supposed to learn to control our passions and keep ourselves within due bounds of the law and restrain ourselves from going outside those lines, right? That's a hard thing to do for anybody. So holding yourselves to a higher standard is, kind of a good quality to be having in Masonry, I would figure.
It's. Oh, sorry, David. Go ahead. Oh,
Go for it.
Now he's shaking his head.
Well, yes. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, one of the things he talks about, I don't know that paragraph or the next one, about that temperance isn't just abstinence, that it's an active thing. I always think of I wrote an article about temperance years ago for the Grand Lodge newsletter, and in it I assert that temperance is a passive virtue. It's it says don't do that. It's the pause in between, oh, I'll have a third beer, and having the third beer where you can go, wait a minute, maybe this isn't a great idea. And the article here talks much more about how it's more active than that, I guess. It's
Well, I mean, it says, although temperance denotes rational control of strong appetites, it should never be confused with the extreme of absolute abstinence, right? So it is a more a matter of moderation, right?
Well, okay. What I find interesting, and this is the one that kind of got me, was the fact is the non-binary way that the article, especially the quote that he quotes Haywood, where it's not just not doing something, it's doing something, which kind of I'm not sure I agree with, because like it in like is basically what he's saying. What I get, I think what they're saying is that temperance is not. It's not enough not to do something bad. You need to do the opposite if you can figure out what the opposite is.
That's the problem. I underline that same section.
Yeah. It's like it's like he says, it's not more than a passive not doing of evil, it is the courageous doing of right. But I'm like, if you're not doing evil, like it's sort of that, like that old saying, if you're not with us, you're against us, even if you're not actively against them. So it kind of threw me a little bit, that one.
There certainly seems to be a movement at least in America, in the United States, of a similar, not to get political necessarily, but the idea of pacifism. And if you're not, kind of like you said, if you're not with us, you're against us. Well, not necessarily, but then it's certainly forming a wide divide of those that are potentially now standing up to say we're going to do something about either side, either way, whatever political side you're on, which I think in the end could become good, because at least people are being active in whatever their beliefs are, and having temperance as the civility tool maybe could be a virtuous opportunity to bring both sides together and to bring that divide together. I don't know if that's possible or not, and maybe we'll have to wait and see how things come together. But it was interesting too how, when I was reading in Pike, he was talking about. No, it wasn't Pike. Sorry, it was the other article, Matt, that you sent. That, in case we didn't have fuel for this fire, but he talked about the guys that were made Masons in the prison. I thought, how can you be Masons while you're in prison? Isn't that? Did you read that too, Arthur? And so I thought, well, and then they were, but the short story was that they were having a fight, and I thought it contributed to this article, because there were factions and there are two sides or three sides, and yet through Masonry they were able to come together and basically stop the feud. And so I think that was a nice addition to this idea of virtue and temperance.
The article to which David is referring was so as I said earlier, we've been sort of doing round robin of each of us choosing an article, and my wife got wind of this, and she suggested an article on the Outlander and the Freemasons that are part of the Outlander story. and it's, yeah, maybe we'll get there. It's an interesting article. I remember I was watching the TV show. I haven't read the book, so I was watching the TV show with her, and I'm like, hey, he's a Mason. He's got a square and compass on his print shop sign. So maybe we'll get new Masons coming in.
I think.
I was just going to say the other thing I noted again from Pike was that he indicated that virtue is the highest good and the destination, aim, and purpose of man's life. And I highlighted it to the section. And so it's not that virtue is just something that we should try to strive for, or that even temperance is an attribute of virtue, but the virtue itself is the highest good and the destined aim and the purpose of life. And so we should have virtue in our life. And I would agree with that. As Masons, that's an absolute element of who we're supposed to be. So if somebody says, well, what is Masonry about? We say, oh, we make good men better. Well, do we? I mean, that's kind of the coin of the phrase. But what I might now say is it makes virtuous men. Or it strives to, it strives to make men virtuous. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
I don't know. I say the common saying is that we take good men and make them better, but really what we do is we take good men and give them the tools to improve themselves. Because all of the lessons that are illustrated by symbols and veiled in allegory and revealed in time to the members are the tools that enable them to improve themselves, right? So really, we're not making them better men. We're giving them the tools.
I hate the word improvement. We're assuming, by saying that, we're assuming that there's something flawed with them to begin with. I think that with what I got out of this article was the word balance.
Yeah, I quite agree with that.
You know, temperance is about balance, because abstinence is the extreme end of, like, abstinence and overindulgence are the extreme ends of the scale, and temperance is the balance between the two. You know, it's as David said, or was it Matt? I'm sorry. Who says, will I have another? No, I've had enough. It's that's what temperance is. And that's the virtue of it, is to find the balance in your life between your desires. And
so the question wasn't, did I have had enough? It says, is somebody going to give me a ride home?
So yeah, I think so. It's interesting. It says like temperance isn't the extreme of abstinence, but I found myself thinking, so the way my brain works when I hear an argument like this, I take it to the extreme, right? So okay, so it's not abstinence. So how many people can I kill and still be temperate? Is that it's only 3 murders. That's probably still temperance, but there's I guess the 4 virtues go hand in hand, right? That might not be intemperate, but it certainly would be unjust to go around killing people who disagree.
I think you covered that in what Jarrod mentioned about the quoting Haywood. Is that there's the conventional morality.
Wait, I have a problem with that one too.
Uh-oh.
Well, by that, I'm a bad person. I steal my kids' Halloween candy. I mean, we all know I drink. I buy lottery tickets, and we all know I swear. So, am I a bad person?
Well, again, I think you're back to what you just said about the idea of the abstinence as maybe a false reality.
Yeah. Is that, I wish I could remember that there was a quote about, is denying something actually you being a good person? Like if you're never tempted, if you're never presented with the temptation, are you actually practicing anything? I'm muddling it, but you sort of get the idea. I can't remember, and I'm rambling now.
That's where I had I want to say issue. I don't want to beat up Sean in the article, but I found that there was a contradiction in that section you're talking about with the abstinence versus the activity of doing. And I thought, well, there seemed to be a contradiction there. And I thought at first it was just me. So I'm glad to hear that you had some similar.
I think part of the problem lies in the age of the quotes.
Could be.
Because in that Haywood quote, he talks about, I got to find it here, is that conventional morality is neuter, virtue is masculine. That don't fly in this day and age. That would not be an appropriate statement to be made.
Well, maybe that would be as opposed to neuter or masculine, you could say whatever, active or passive or something like that to convey the same.
Probably, but that's what I'm saying, is that we have to be. This is one of the issues in Freemasonry. I find that we have to be very careful is pointing at being too reliant on things from too long ago to define what we're doing. Because we have evolved in the last couple centuries.
Certainly not taking it as absolute.
Yeah. Accepting the time that it was written in and reframing it in more current acceptable language.
What?
No, I'm not talking about rewriting the ritual. I see that look in your eyes.
I think that's going to be our recurring theme for this year.
You'll appreciate the annual report from the Research and Education Committee, Matt, because Andre kind of alludes to that. I thought, as I was reading, I thought, that's Matt. I think Matt coached him.
Yeah, so one of the things that I found powerful about the article was talking about using the 24-inch gauge and common gavel, which are, and we had an article a couple episodes ago about the 24-inch gauge. We did a couple episodes on that.
Right.
And I thought it was interesting tying those. I like it when there are connections between things that make sense to me, and that connection I appreciated.
Yeah,
he's not saying don't have fun. He's saying you have 8 hours.
Yeah, joining those lessons was really good in this article, to kind of get you to think about it from a different aspect or a different point of view, right?
Well, that's exactly what those tools are designed or symbolized for us as Masonry, is the idea of temperance, right? You have 8 hours for this and 8 hours for that and 8 hours for that, or the illusion, the idea of evenly just dividing your time appropriately.
So you mean balance?
Okay.
Well, because
equilibrium.
Because equilibrium is 8, 8, and 8. Balance means that you have nothing. You have not gone to the extreme in either. Like examples, we all know the brother who is in everything in Freemasonry and is constantly complaining about never having enough time to do anything. That is an extreme one.
I'm not sure who I'm pointing at on your screen, but
yeah. The other one that is also we have the brothers that are so busy with work they don't have time.
Yeah.
For Freemason, and there's lack of balance in their use of the 24-inch gauge. So but that's where temperance comes in, is to know when you are hitting an extreme one way or the other, and when you need to bring yourself back into balance.
The other thing Pike talked about was that to not confuse the power to do, which is limited, with the power of will. He calls it sovereign. I had that quote next to the section we're talking about the physical doing of right. And so part of me wanted to agree with that. I believe that the power of thought and the power of will is very strong and active, and that doing something physically, you may be limited in that. But I don't know that just willing that I'm virtuous and willing that I'm temperate, believing it is the same as doing it. Like Matt said, only having 2 beers instead of 3, or scotch, or whatever it is you're drinking.
Well, we'll get to fortitude later. There's another issue on the fortitude. So yeah, it's another image that I appreciate also was the walking on the the
tiles,
mosaic pavement.
Yes, the checkerboard. Mm-hmm. There we go, mosaic pavement. Thank you. I lost my brain there for a second. The black and white tiles of the floor, and I guess you could be really careful about it and Ms. Mary Mac your way across the floor and not touch any of the black tiles. But as the candidate walks across the floor, you're stepping on both black and white tiles, and you're in the same way that your life is going to be checkered with good and evil things. So, I feel like we ran through the whole article there. Did anybody else have any thoughts on? Nope. Okay. So I guess I'll say again that we the
last little bit here was actually also I found interesting, where he said it's in an ideal sense, right? Though it's admittedly, hang on, better go back up to there. He symbolically becomes committed to walk just and upright in an ideal sense, right? And so though it's admittedly difficult for anyone to always live up to the high standards set by our craft. The entered apprentice at the conclusion of the first degree has taken an initiatic responsibility over his moral destiny to do these, to hold himself to that higher standard that we were talking about earlier, which I don't know. Are the standards set too high, or because it says, admittedly difficult, right? Yeah, okay, it's difficult, but are they too difficult, right? Are we setting the standard too high and expecting too much?
Depends on the standard that you're setting and when you're setting it. I don't think, because we're, once again, as with all the degrees, we're giving the candidate the tools and asking them to do with it as best they can.
Sounds like the perils of the perfect Ashler.
Once again, balance.
Balance.
So, yeah, it's, I mean, as it says in our ritual, this virtue should be the constant practice of every Mason. I guess, as I said in choosing the article, it is certainly something that I can use some work on, and I bet a lot of other Masons could too. So, in short, we had our discussion today of the Virtue of Temperance by Sean Eyre, and I encourage everyone to go and check out the Fraternal Review. It's pretty nifty publication, and with that, on behalf of David and Jarrod and Stephen and myself, I want to thank all of you for listening, and we'll talk to you soon on the Working Tools Podcast.